We're doing research on this right now, and it's funny because I think serverless is a horrible name for a very, very important trend. So we've been going out, we've been asking folks, well, what is serverless? And we actually started from some fairly basic questions like, is Twilio serverless? And I think we've concluded, no, Twilio is not necessarily serverless per se. There are services, and services are part of a serverless architecture. But when you distill it down to its core, the idea of arbitrary units of compute that developers can deploy and then not have to worry about how they scale and how they are mapped onto hardware or infrastructure is at the core of serverless. And then there's some very important things around that, like events. Because when these services fire, and function as a service is a good example of a serverless type of architecture, there's got to be an event for them to bind to and to fire off at the end. And then you often see atomic billing, so only billing for the function that you consume. And so when you start to put these things together and you build asynchronous style architectures on them, you start to see very interesting things, and you can build systems that scale massively. And in the words of one of the folks that we talked to, you only pay for your average compute, not your max compute. And that's really different from a functional standpoint, because the first wave of cloud architecture took us from buying all the hardware and getting stuck with the hardware and having that sunk cost to being able to only pay for the compute or the storage or the networking that you used, but there was still kind of a high level of atomic compute, a CPU or a fraction of a CPU. And so serverless really takes us to that next level of only really paying for what you execute, not just for the compute units. We're starting to see it affect architectures too. So some good examples here at Salesforce. Salesforce is evolving its API to be event driven so that it is ready to become part of a serverless architecture. Adobe is evolving its API to make it event driven and also have some ability to execute compute from an extensibility standpoint. Twilio, we'll go back to the example I gave earlier, has introduced additional functions as part of its architecture, and even a studio that lets you stitch together journeys with these functions and services. So in the end, while an individual Twilio service may not be serverless, it's a key part of a serverless architecture and a building block for serverless functionality and compute as well. We think it's going to be big. We think it's going to be the next phase of cloud architecture, and it really is the next logical evolution in how we pay for cloud.